The old courthouse loomed quietly beneath the warm morning sun, its stone steps worn smooth by decades of hurried footsteps and whispered secrets. Inside, the air was thick with the low murmur of voices, shuffling papers, and the occasional scrape of a judge's gavel. It was the kind of place where most people kept their heads down and their emotions carefully locked away. But Emily, a small 6-year-old with chestnut curls and wide, curious eyes, didn't seem to notice the usual seriousness that filled the halls. Clutching a well-loved stuffed puppy tightly against her chest, she walked hand in hand with her mother, Mrs. Anderson. The two had come to support a friend involved in a neighborhood dispute case. A simple matter, really, but one that required her mother's presence as a witness. Emily's dress was neat and a little old-fashioned, with tiny white flowers embroidered along the hem. Yet despite the crowd of suited adults and stern officials, she seemed out of place for more than just her size. Her attention was elsewhere, drifting from one curious detail to another: the patterned carpet, the polished wood of the benches, the flickering lights above. Then, as they entered the courtroom itself, Emily's gaze snapped to something entirely different. In the corner near the judge's bench sat a large German shepherd dog wearing a black vest embroidered with the word K9. The dog's ears stood up straight, eyes sharp and alert, but calm. Beside the dog was a uniformed officer holding the leash gently but firmly. Most of the courtroom barely noticed the dog. To them it was just another part of the official setting, a reminder of security maybe, or a symbol of law enforcement's reach. But to Emily it was like seeing an old friend she hadn't recognized at first. Her small feet carried her a few steps closer, despite the gentle tug on her mother's hand. Mrs. Anderson whispered, "Emily, stay by me, sweetheart." But the girl didn't seem to hear. Her eyes didn't leave the dog. The officer glanced down, noticing the little girl's curious stare. The dog shifted slightly, ears twitching as if sensing something familiar too. The courtroom started to fill with the dull drone of proceedings, voices rising and falling as lawyers presented their cases. But for Emily, time seemed to slow. The noise faded into a background hum, and all she could focus on was the dog's steady breathing, the soft flick of his tail, the way his eyes seemed to hold stories she could almost hear. Suddenly, a memory flickered in her mind. Long summer days, running through the yard with a furry friend, a puppy with big paws and a joyful bark. The memory was faint but vivid, like an old song playing softly in the background. Emily's fingers tightened around her stuffed puppy as she took a small, uncertain step forward. The courtroom buzzed with tension and anticipation, though no one quite understood why yet. The dog's gaze locked onto Emily's face, and for a brief moment the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Who was this little girl? And why did her quiet presence make the air feel charged, as if something long lost was about to be found? Mrs. Anderson's eyes widened with a mix of surprise and worry, as she finally realized her daughter's strange reaction. She exchanged a quick, puzzled glance with the officer, who offered a cautious, almost knowing smile. The judge called the court to order, but the eyes of nearly everyone in the room were drawn to that small moment, where a little girl and a police dog seemed to share a silent secret neither had yet spoken aloud. Emily didn't know it yet, but this day, this courtroom, and this dog were about to change her life forever. As the courtroom settled into the rhythm of the day's proceedings, Emily remained rooted near the front, her eyes never leaving the police dog. Max, the dog's name as the officer's badge later revealed, sat motionless beside Officer Daniels, his posture calm but alert. To most, Max was just a well-trained K9 unit, a symbol of authority and protection. But to Emily, he was something far more. The trial droned on around them. Lawyers spoke in measured tones, witnesses took the stand, and the judge carefully listened. Yet, all of this faded into the background for Emily. She wasn't just watching a police dog. She was watching someone she recognized. Max's deep brown eyes flickered in her direction from time to time, following her every subtle movement. His nose twitched as if sensing a familiar scent carried by the little girl. Emily could feel his gaze as clearly as if he were looking right into her heart. She knew somehow that this dog was the same one she had once known. It had been nearly 3 years since they had lost Max, the loyal German shepherd puppy who had been her constant companion. The memory of him, warm, playful and brave, was etched into her young mind like a treasured storybook. But after their family's home was broken into, Max vanished without a trace. Despite countless searches, police reports and tears, the dog was never found. And now here he was, sitting so close yet in a place so far from home. Emily's mother, Mrs. Anderson, watched nervously. She tugged gently at Emily's sleeve, whispering, "Sweetheart, don't distract the court." But Emily's gaze remained fixed, her small face serious and intent. Something inside her told her she had to stay near Max. Officer Daniels, the man holding Max's leash, noticed the girl's quiet fascination. He bent slightly, offering a gentle smile. "Hey there, little one," he said softly. "You like Max?" Emily nodded but said nothing. Instead, she took a small step forward, as if drawn by an invisible thread connecting her to the dog. Max's tail gave a tiny wag. The courtroom's atmosphere shifted subtly. Whispers fluttered through the crowd, eyes darting between the girl and the dog. The judge paused momentarily, curious about the unexpected attention Emily was drawing. For Emily, the connection was more than visual. It was emotional. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small worn dog tag that once belonged to Max. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held it out, hoping Max might recognize it. The dog's ears perked, and he turned his head slowly toward the glimmering tag. A flicker of recognition seemed to pass through his eyes. "Max," Emily whispered, barely audible, but enough for the officer to hear. Officer Daniels blinked in surprise. "How do you know his name, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. Emily looked up, meeting his gaze with a steady seriousness that made the room hold its breath. "Because he's mine," she said simply. The words landed like a sudden thunderclap in the courtroom. Murmurs rippled through the audience, and even the judge paused his official demeanor. The officers and lawyers exchanged confused and intrigued glances. Was this just a child's imagination, or was there more to this quiet moment? Emily took another step closer, holding out the dog tag. Max responded immediately, leaning in to sniff the familiar scent, his eyes bright with recognition. The bond between them, invisible to all but unmistakable to those two, created a ripple of awe and curiosity. Mrs. Anderson stepped forward, her voice trembling as she asked, "How did you—" Emily's face softened. "Max was my puppy before," she said quietly, "before he disappeared. I've missed him every day." The courtroom was silent, the usual legal tension replaced by a sudden wave of empathy. For a moment, everyone saw Emily not just as a little girl, but as a child who had lost something precious, and a dog who might have found his way back, in a way no one expected. Officer Daniels looked down at Max, then back at Emily. "You're saying this is the same dog?" Emily nodded, her eyes shimmering. "Yes." The judge called for a brief recess, sensing the need to understand this surprising turn of events. The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving behind an air thick with questions. Emily stayed close to Max, her hand brushing gently along his fur. The knee. Dog rested his head on her knee, a silent promise passing between them, a promise that this was just the beginning of a story no one would forget. The courtroom was unusually quiet, as the judge called for a short recess, allowing the tension in the room to settle. The spectators, lawyers, and even the officers lingered, curious about the small girl and the police dog who seemed to share a secret. Yet no one could quite understand the full story. Not yet. Emily remained near Max, her fingers gently tracing the coarse fur on his neck. Max, for his part, rested his heavy head in her lap, eyes half closed but alert. The two shared a silent bond that filled the space between them with something deeper than words. Officer Daniels crouched down beside Emily, his expression a mix of kindness and surprise. "You said his name is Max?" he asked gently. Emily nodded solemnly. "Yes, he was my puppy before he got lost." The officer's brow furrowed. "Lost?" Emily swallowed hard and looked up at her mother, who stood nearby, her face pale and uncertain. Mrs. Anderson stepped forward, her voice quiet but steady. "It's true. Our home was broken into a few years ago and Max disappeared. We thought we'd never see him again." The courtroom murmured softly, sympathy spreading like a gentle wave. It was a story of loss and hope, something everyone could understand. Officer Daniels exchanged a look with one of the other officers, then pulled out a small notebook. "Max here was found as a stray about 2 years ago," he explained. "We took him in, trained him, and he's been with the K9 unit since. He's one of our best." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. "I remember training him when he was just a puppy. He knew all the commands. Sit, stay, come, only I called them differently." The officer smiled. "Really? Like what?" "Instead of sit, I used to say sit pretty. And instead of stay, I said wait right here." Emily's voice was small but clear. The officer glanced down at Max, who suddenly perked up and sat tall. Then, with a soft bark, Max responded to a command that wasn't the usual sit, but echoed Emily's words perfectly. The courtroom fell silent again, every eye fixed on the scene unfolding before them. "Is that possible?" a lawyer whispered. Emily looked up, hopeful but unsure. "That's Max." The judge, intrigued and deeply moved, invited Emily's mother and Officer Daniels to step into a private room nearby. The conversations that followed were hushed, serious, but full of something rare, hope. Inside the room, Mrs. Anderson recounted the heartbreak of the night Max vanished. She spoke of the police reports filed, the flyers posted, and the countless times the family had called animal shelters, always with no luck. Officer Daniels listened carefully, then shared how Max had been found wandering near an abandoned warehouse, skinny and scared, before being rescued by a patrol officer. He had no microchip, and no one had claimed him, so the department decided to train him for K9 duties. "We thought Max was lost forever," Mrs. Anderson whispered, her voice breaking. "But now, it feels like a miracle." Emily stood quietly, beside her mother, clutching her stuffed puppy tightly. "Max never forgot me," she said simply, "and I never forgot him." Back in the courtroom, the buzz of whispers grew louder. Reporters had caught wind of the unusual moment, and phones were quietly capturing the scene. The story of the little girl and the police dog was spreading fast. Suddenly, a lawyer from the defense approached Officer Daniels. "If this dog truly belonged to the child, what does that mean for his role here? Is he still a police dog, or—" The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Officer Daniels sighed. "That's what we're trying to figure out." Emily didn't fully understand the legal complications, but she knew one thing clearly in her heart. Max was not just a police dog. He was family. As the recess drew to a close and the courtroom prepared to reconvene, Emily looked once more at Max. The dog's deep eyes met hers, filled with warmth and something like recognition, a silent promise that whatever happened next, they were connected forever. The judge called the court back to order. The trial was about to continue, but the story had already shifted. The simple utterance of one name, Max, had opened a door to a mystery, a reunion, and a choice that would change many lives. Emily's quiet courage and the dog's unwavering loyalty had left the entire courtroom stunned, holding their breath for what would come next. The courtroom settled into a tense quiet as the judge called for a brief recess to allow for discussions behind closed doors. Outside the public eye, Emily's mother, Mrs. Anderson, sat in a small waiting room, her hands trembling as memories flooded back, memories she hadn't allowed herself to revisit for years. It had been 3 long years since their world was shattered. Their family had lived in a quiet neighborhood, a cozy house with a backyard where Max, then a rambunctious German shepherd puppy, loved to run and play. Emily had named him Max when he was just a tiny ball of fur with clumsy paws and a playful bark. He was more than a pet. He was her best friend, her guardian, and a bright light in her childhood. Then, one terrible night, everything changed. The front door had been left slightly ajar after a family dinner. A sudden noise in the middle of... The night had awakened Mrs. Anderson. She had rushed out to find shadows moving through the house, and in the confusion and fear, Max was gone, stolen in the chaos of a break-in. The police had arrived quickly, searching every inch of the neighborhood. Flyers went up on lampposts and neighbors shared the news, but Max was nowhere to be found. Weeks turned into months, and the hope of seeing their beloved dog again slowly slipped away. Emily had cried herself to sleep every night for months, clutching her stuffed puppy and whispering Max's name. Her once joyful laughter faded, replaced by a quiet sadness. Now sitting in the courthouse waiting room, Mrs. Anderson tried to steady her breath. She looked at Emily, who sat quietly beside her, eyes wide but steady, holding on to the belief that Max was still out there somewhere. Officer. Daniels entered the room, carrying a folder filled with documents and photos. He pulled out a picture of a young German shepherd in training, a dog with the same deep brown eyes and strong build as Max. "This is Max," he said gently. "When we found him, he was scared and alone, but he took to the training quickly. He's become one of the best canines on the force." Mrs. Anderson nodded, tears welling up. "He's a brave dog, always was." Emily reached out and touched the photo, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's him." The officer smiled softly. "We checked for a microchip, but there wasn't one. No one ever came forward to claim him, so we trained him for police work." "Why didn't you find out if he belonged to anyone?" Mrs. Anderson asked, her voice trembling. "We tried," Officer Daniels admitted. "But without identification, it was hard. We didn't know his history until today." Emily's eyes sparkled with determination. "He remembers me." That simple sentence seemed to fill the room with hope. Outside the courthouse, news crews had begun gathering. The unusual story of a little girl, a police dog, and a courtroom reunion had quickly captured attention. Reporters whispered about the emotional bond forming between Emily and Max, speculating on the impossible. Back inside, the judge prepared to hear the next phase of the trial. But this time, the focus had shifted. The courtroom was no longer just a place for legal arguments. It had become a stage for a reunion of love, loss, and loyalty. Mrs. Anderson stood, smoothing Emily's dress. "We don't want to take Max away from the police," she said quietly to Officer Daniels. "He's doing important work and we respect that. But we want to know he's safe. We want to know he's still loved." Officer Daniels nodded, slowly. "That's why we're going to do everything we can to confirm his identity." The weight of the moment pressed down on them all. For Emily, it was more than a reunion. It was the healing of a wound that had never truly closed. As the courtroom doors opened once more, Emily took Max's paw in her hand, feeling the warmth beneath the fur and the steady beat of a heart that had been missing from her life. The crowd watched in silence, moved by the fragile yet powerful connection. The story was far from over, but in that moment, a family's heartbreak began to mend. The courthouse was abuzz with anticipation as the trial resumed. Though the original case remained the focus, all eyes subtly shifted toward the small girl and the police dog at the front of the room. Emily sat quietly beside her mother, her fingers never leaving Max's thick fur. Max, for his part, sat alert but calm, as if understanding that today might bring answers that had long been out of reach. Officer Daniels rose and addressed the judge, his voice steady but tinged with hope. "Your Honor, we would like to request a DNA test to confirm whether this dog, known to us as Max, is indeed the same Max that belonged to the Anderson family." The courtroom murmured, and the judge nodded thoughtfully. "If there is a scientific method to resolve this, I see no reason not to allow it. This is an extraordinary circumstance. The request set the wheels in motion. The court arranged for a veterinarian and a forensic dog specialist to conduct the DNA testing as soon as possible. Emily's heart pounded as she sat, silently willing the results to prove what she already knew, that Max was hers. Days later, Emily and her mother returned to the courthouse, this time to hear the outcome. The air was thick with nervous energy. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath as the forensic specialist took the stand. The specialist explained the process. DNA samples were taken from Max, along with a swab from a hairbrush, the Anderson. Family had kept a piece of their old life, a connection to the past. The test, he said, would determine with nearly absolute certainty whether Max was the same dog. Emily squeezed her mother's hand tightly, her mind racing through memories of Max's playful antics, his gentle nuzzles, and his unwavering loyalty. Finally, the specialist looked up, clearing his throat. "The results are in," he announced. "The DNA samples match. This is the same dog." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Emily's face lit up with a radiant smile, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Max," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. Max responded immediately, wagging his tail and resting his head on Emily's lap, as if he understood the significance of the moment. Mrs. Anderson fought back tears, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly to the officers and the court. "Thank you for bringing our family back together." The judge acknowledged the emotional weight of the situation. "This court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances here. We will now need to address the legal aspects concerning Max's future." Officer Daniels stood, his voice respectful but firm. "Max has been an essential part of our K-9 unit. He's saved lives and protected our community. We want to ensure his welfare and his connection to the Anderson family." A delicate balance hung in the air. Max was both a beloved family pet and a valued member of the police force. The judge proposed a solution. "I suggest a period of evaluation where Max can spend time with the Anderson family and continue his work with the department. A formal agreement can be drafted to reflect this unique arrangement." Mrs. Anderson nodded gratefully. "That sounds fair. We want what's best for Max." Emily, though young, understood the importance of compromise. She hugged Max tightly, whispering, "We'll always be together." Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed, eager to capture the story of the reunion that had touched so many hearts. Photos were taken, interviews conducted, and soon the tale of Emily and Max became a symbol of hope and resilience. For Emily, life was changing in ways she never expected. She was no longer just a little girl in the courtroom. She was a part of something bigger, a story that reminded everyone of the power of love and the strength found in unlikely reunions. As she walked away from the courthouse that day, Max trotting faithfully beside her, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been long and difficult, but the bond she shared with Max was unbreakable. Together they were ready to face whatever came next. The weeks following the courtroom's decision were filled with a whirlwind of emotions, new routines, and cautious optimism. Emily's world, once defined by loss and uncertainty, began to brighten with the promise of a fresh start. Max, the loyal dog who had vanished and then reappeared, was now both a cherished family member and a respected police K-9. The arrangement agreed upon by the court was unique. Max would spend time with the Anderson family when off duty, but would continue his service with the police force during working hours. Officer Daniels and the K-9 unit were committed to ensuring the dog's well-being and honoring the bond he shared with Emily. For Emily, the return of Max was nothing short of a miracle. The little girl who had once clung to a stuffed puppy now had the real thing back in her life. She spent every moment she could with Max, relearning his habits, playing with him in the backyard, and filling their home with laughter and warmth once more. Max, too, seemed to recognize the change. His eyes sparkled with renewed joy whenever Emily was near. The dog's energy returned to playful bounds, and his loyalty deepened in ways that could be seen in every gentle nuzzle and protective stance. One sunny afternoon, Emily and her mother took Max for a walk in the park. The familiar sights and sounds stirred memories of happier times. Emily tossed a ball, and Max sprinted after it with youthful enthusiasm, his powerful legs carrying him swiftly across the grass. A group of children gathered nearby, their faces lighting up at the sight of Max. They asked Emily about the dog, and she proudly shared the story of their reunion, explaining how Max had once been lost, but had found his way back to her. Officer Daniels joined them later, checking on Max's health and offering encouragement. "He's in great shape," he said with a smile. "Still sharp and ready for duty." Emily beamed. "I'm so glad he's back." Yet, despite the joy, challenges remained. The balance between Max's role as a working police dog and a family pet required careful attention. The Andersons had to learn when to respect Max's training and duties, and when to simply enjoy him as their beloved companion. At night, Emily often whispered stories to Max as he lay beside her bed, his breathing steady and comforting. She told him about the dreams she'd had when he was gone, dreams filled with hope and reunion. Max seemed to listen, his eyes soft and full of trust. School was different now, too. Emily's classmates heard the story of Max and asked questions, curious and amazed. Emily found herself telling the tale again and again, each time with a little more confidence. Her teachers noticed a change as well. Emily was more focused and happier, her spark returning like a bright flame after a long winter. But the story wasn't just about Emily. It touched the hearts of the entire community. Local news outlets followed their journey, sharing updates about the unique bond between a girl and her dog, and how love could bridge even the longest separations. One evening, the police department hosted a small gathering to honor Max's service. The event was filled with smiles, applause, and heartfelt speeches. Officer Daniels spoke about Max's bravery and dedication, and Mrs. Anderson thanked the officers for their kindness and support. Emily stood beside Max, her hand resting gently on his collar. "Thank you for bringing him back," she whispered to the officer. Officer Daniels smiled warmly. It was Max who brought us all together. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the crowd, Emily knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter. The past had shaped them, but the future was theirs to write. Together, Emily and Max were ready to face the adventures ahead, united by a bond that no time or distance could ever break. The months that followed brought new challenges and unexpected triumphs for Emily, Max, and the Anderson family. Life was far from perfect, but it was alive with hope, purpose, and a growing sense of belonging. Max continued his rigorous training with the police force. Officer Daniels and the K-9 unit pushed him to stay sharp, keeping his skills honed for the demanding work that lay ahead. Search and rescue drills, obedience exercises, and scent tracking filled Max's weekdays, but he always returned home to Emily with a wagging tail and a joyful spirit. Emily had adjusted to the delicate balance between Max's roles as a working dog and a family member. She learned when to respect his duties and when to simply enjoy his company. Some days that meant early morning walks together before Max headed to the station. Other times, it meant sitting quietly with him after long shifts, sharing the silence of companionship. School life presented its own set of hurdles. Emily had to manage her studies alongside the media attention that followed her story. Reporters occasionally stopped by, eager to hear updates or capture a photo of Emily and Max. While some attention felt overwhelming, Emily found strength in her newfound confidence. One day, a special event was organized at Emily's school. Max, dressed in his official police vest, was invited to demonstrate some of his training skills to the students. The gymnasium filled with excited children and teachers, all eager to see the famous dog in action. Max performed flawlessly. He obeyed commands, found hidden objects by scent, and showed off his agility. Emily watched from the front row, her heart swelling with pride. After the demonstration, Emily stood beside Max as her classmates gathered around to pet him and ask questions. For the first time in years, Emily felt completely at ease sharing her story, not just as a tale of loss, but as a story of hope and resilience. But life, as always, was not without difficulties. One afternoon, Max alerted Officer Daniels during a routine patrol to something unusual, an intense scent near an abandoned building on the edge of town. The officers approached cautiously, following Max's lead. Inside, they found evidence of illegal activity and quickly called for backup. The discovery led to a major investigation, with Max playing a crucial role in tracking suspects and uncovering hidden evidence. The case was complex and dangerous, requiring long hours and careful planning. Emily followed the news closely, feeling a mix of pride and worry. She knew Max was brave and skilled, but the thought of him in harm's way tugged at her heart. When the investigation concluded with several arrests, the community praised the police and their K-9 unit. Max was hailed as a hero, and Emily's story became an inspiration to many. Yet, amidst the triumph, the Andersons remained grounded. They focused on the small moments, the quiet evenings at home, the walks in the park, the gentle comfort of Max's presence. One evening, Emily sat on the porch with her mother, watching Max play with their younger brother in the yard. The laughter and light in the air felt like a balm for the wounds of the past. Mrs. Anderson turned to Emily, her voice soft. "You've both come so far." Emily smiled, her eyes shining. "Max saved me, but I think I saved him too." Mrs. Anderson nodded. "You saved each other." In those moments, the family knew their bond was unbreakable, fortified by love, courage, and a shared journey through hardship. Emily's story was far from over. With Max by her side, she felt ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that together they could overcome anything. The seasons shifted as the year rolled on, bringing change, growth, and a deepening bond between Emily, Max, and their community. What had started as a courtroom reunion had blossomed into a story of healing, courage, and unbreakable loyalty. Emily's confidence flourished with each passing day. She became more outgoing at school, eager to share her experiences and advocate for animal welfare programs. Inspired by Max's journey, she spoke at local events, telling children and adults alike about the power of hope and perseverance. Max, too, showed remarkable progress. Though his work with the police force remained demanding, he seemed to carry an extra spark, an undeniable connection to Emily that made him even more determined and focused. One crisp autumn morning, a special ceremony was held at the police department. The mayor, community leaders, and local families gathered to honor Max's exceptional service and the incredible story that had captured hearts everywhere. Emily, dressed in her best, stood proudly beside Max as Officer Daniels presented a medal, engraved with Max's name. "This medal," Officer Daniels announced, "is not just for Max's bravery, but for the hope and inspiration he has given to our community." Tears filled Emily's eyes as she leaned down to hug Max. "You're a hero, Max," Max responded with a gentle lick as if to say, "We're heroes together." After the ceremony, the Anderson family returned home to their cozy house, the place where it all began. The yard was alive with colors of fall, and the golden light of the afternoon sun wrapped around them like a warm embrace. Emily sat on the porch steps, Max resting his head on her lap. The quiet moments were just as precious as the public celebrations. Mrs. Anderson joined them, smiling softly. "I never thought we'd come this far." Emily looked up, her voice steady and sure. "We couldn't have without each other." Their bond had been tested by loss, strengthened by time, and now stood as a testament to resilience. But the story that had touched so many wasn't just about a little girl and her dog. It was about the power of love to heal wounds, the courage to fight for what matters, and the magic of second chances. Weeks later, Emily's school announced a new program, a community outreach initiative inspired by her story and Max's work. It focused on teaching children about compassion, responsibility, and the important roles animals can play in people's lives. Emily was invited to be a youth ambassador, a role she embraced wholeheartedly. She visited classrooms, shared her journey, and encouraged others to believe in the impossible. Through it all, Max remained her steadfast companion, loyal, brave, and endlessly loving. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily and Max sat quietly in the backyard. The world was calm and still, filled with the promise of tomorrow. Emily whispered, "Thank you, Max, for coming back to me, for never giving up." Max rested his head on her shoulder, a silent promise that they would face whatever came next. Together. Their story, once filled with uncertainty and heartbreak, had come full circle. It was a story of hope, healing, and the unbreakable bond between a girl and her dog, one that would inspire hearts for years to come. And in that peaceful moment, Emily knew that no matter what the future held, they would always have each other.